Hey, I'm back. Welcome to the Year in Review 2022, and that rhymes, and I know it rhymes. I know it rhymes. Also, I'm not doing this in August. I swear to you, it's not August right now. It's not August. Anyway, we're going to be doing another yearly review of all the games that I played in 2022. I personally like these, so they'll probably become a yearly upload on this channel. But, real quick, something I should have clarified last year, but I didn't, is, how I rank games. So games get an S, A, B, C, or F ranking. There is no other ranking that they can get outside of that, unless I make some really weird exception in the future. But for now, this is how rankings go. S is a game that I think is exceptional. It does something that just knocks me out of the park. It's something that I would have never expected for a game. And A is still a really good game. It doesn't do anything super special. So it's just, it does exactly what I expect, but it does it really, really well, and there's no issues. A B is a game that I think is really good. It has a couple minor issues, or something along that line, but it's usually not enough to make a bad experience for one reason or another. And a C is a good game, but maybe not something personally my taste, but I can tell there is a good game. And it's something that I still think is a good game. The only ranking that is and means bad game is an F. When I give a game an F, it means I just didn't like it, or I don't think it's a good game, for any reason. I'll be very clear with that reason every single time. F is a bad game. I didn't like it. That being said, I think we should get into the review for this year. Let's kick it off! Warioware Smooth Moves. This game is a very early Wii game. There isn't anything inherently wrong with that, but you definitely feel it in the gameplay. Some of the microgames work incredibly well, while others feel like they don't control that great. In a single-player setting, playing a microgame and then losing a run because control issues is just frustrating. However, in a multiplayer setting, it's the complete opposite. Playing games like this where the control is so variable, making for chaotic games, is the stuff I love playing with friends. Most of the microgames are super easy to understand, so literally anyone can understand what the objective is and what to do with the Wii remote. I also love the way the different forms were described. It never failed to get a chuckle out of me. It's pretty much the perfect Wii game. Wacky and silly, and just uses the Wiimote to the fullest potential, so gets a B. Spyro the Dragon. I'm of the opinion that a vast majority of early 3D games do not hold up well, in every single aspect. Gameplay, game design, visuals. I am happy to report that Spyro the Dragon does not fall into these pitfalls. The game's got a lot of charm with the design of the enemies and the characters, the world, and Spyro himself. It's a very cozy game, and it's fun to just run around for a while within the levels themselves. Spyro feels so natural and effortless to control, and the world is a perfect showcase for those skills. As a game, it's a collectathon platformer, which was very popular at the time, and this game explains to me why. It feels very good to just actually collect the things you're collecting. I'd even argue that the visuals have a strong art style that holds up great. All that being said, it gets an A.
Ah, Spyro, thanks. Supercharge will get you to new places here in Lofty Castle, too. See where it takes you.
Dandy Dungeon. I must really have a thing for games with dungeon in the name. Dandy Dungeon is a game genre that I haven't really played before, being a mix between a puzzle game and an RPG. This sounds like a terrible idea, but for me it just works. It makes a game that is fun in short bursts, but still ends up being engaging for long periods of time. On top of that, it's a silly game with a lot of humor, and many moments that made me chuckle at the absurdity of it all. It's a game that I highly recommend you pick up, not only to support Onion Games, but also to play a game that I'm comfortable saying is one of a kind. S. Earthbound. With the game's release on Nintendo Switch Online, I just had to replay it. And I just wouldn't feel right doing a quick review of this game, specifically Earthbound, or Mother 2 as it was known in Japan. So, maybe it's a video for another day, but just know that this game gets an S. Earthbound Beginnings. Now, Earthbound Beginnings I have a more limited history with, so I'd be happy to do a quick review of it. My thoughts of this game are generally positive, with a couple of very important notes. There is a reason why I beat this game last. It is by far the most grindy game in the series, with the walkthrough being practically required to beat the game, as many of the places they want you to go aren't clearly laid out. I highly recommend playing this game on Switch Online, and making good use of the rewind feature and the Starman.net spoiler-free walkthrough. You'll get the most out of the game if you do it this way. That being said, it is still an Earthbound game at its heart, with a lot of silly tones mixed with serious ones, and a character I believe to be more fleshed out than Ness. I do think it's worth a play, but only after Earthbound and Mother 3. It gets a B. F-Zero. I still believe this game is a really cool and unique look that I'm personally a really big fan of. The game's got a really cool exterior that's matched by the game's sense of speed. It's a game that's easy to learn, but hard to master, and the game will kick your butt until you learn how to operate the Blue Falcon. The game is iconic and has a completely different feel from Mario Kart, and it makes sense as to why people still want more of that gameplay today. I think my only complaint is that I wish that I could play with a friend. Like, I can tell that the multiplayer for this game would be really fun, it's just missing it entirely. And on top of that, I think the game is just lacking in content. There's just not enough courses or deviations in those courses. I guess that's to be expected though, with it being just a launch title for the SNES. And for that, I think it is pretty good. I think its biggest strength is, it's also its biggest weakness, is its simplicity. Overall, I'd give it just a B. Bowser's Fury. For a side mode, it's really fleshed out, and for me it justifies the repurchase of Super Mario 3D World. It's so good that I feel the need to include it separately from 3D World. It's weird because you can tell that it's made in the 3D World engine, but it just plays so differently. It makes me wish that the rest of 3D World had the same structure. It's fun to run around the world and discover new locations, collect cat shrines. Mario's movement is fluid, and I rarely ever found any hiccups. Towards the end, collecting all the cat shrines can become a little tedious, and even the reuse of some of the same missions, like finding all the bunnies, can get a little repetitive at times, but for how short the experience is, that's like the most minor nitpick. I didn't even talk about Fury Bowser, and how cool his parts were. Overall, it's a very enjoyable game that does not overstay its welcome. A. Moon. Onion Games strikes again, this time with an official translation of the Japanese-only Hidden Gem for the PlayStation 1. This game is really hard to describe. It's a lot like a point-and-click adventure, where the goal is just to find out what to do. It's the kind of game that when you play it, you think you know what it's going to be like, but knowing what I do, I can tell you that it goes places that I would have never have guessed. Characters in the game run their own schedules, and that means that their lives don't revolve around you, you're just a member of it. However, there is so much to learn about each character that it's fun exploring their lives. I also like the theming of the game, being that you're stuck in an RPG, and you're capturing the souls of monsters killed by the main hero. However, I do wish the game leaned a little bit more into that theming, with the appearances of the hero and more RPG-like elements. I also got lost a handful of times, and I'm glad that I could fall back on the Onion Games community to point me in the right direction. But I wish there was just a bit more direction at times. I highly recommend this game, not only because it feels like an indie on the PS1, but I argue that there are a few games like it. A. Catherine Fullbody. This game is a very interesting way to create a puzzle and story game combination. I'll talk about each of those parts separately though. The puzzle game portion feels great. It's a very unique puzzler with a lot of strategy that feels great to pull off. Puzzles mix between action puzzling and critical thinking. And I really enjoyed the challenge it posed. The punishment for failing is just restarting the stage or at one of the numerous checkpoints, so it was never really that harsh. Now, let's talk about the story. I'll be spoiling a bit of the game, so feel free to skip this if you want to go in blind, which I highly recommend. The story had me cringing and yelling at my screen from pretty much start to end of the game. The main character, Vincent, is a person that wants change in his life, and so starts cheating on a woman with the person that he's currently dating, and befriends a third. Vincent continually makes bad decisions in this game, and has many close calls with each of the women meeting each other out of context. It makes me wish that there were just like more options to pick how the story would go, other than just kind of changing a bit right at the end. I also don't like the fighting gods ending of the game. It kind of just feels like it comes out of nowhere and they needed to fill a god killing quota. Outside of that, I think the story is well written. If I personally wasn't a big fan of its themes, I think that just means I'll give it a B.
I can get out through here?
Super Mario Brothers. This game is highly influential and is super important to the video game industry. It's a very simple and charming game. There is a reason why this game was so critical to saving the video game industry. Nowadays, I like this game for the wrong reason. It's not because the physics are great, or the graphics are pretty, or even that the music's iconic, but mainly because it's just fun to run through the game in like 10 minutes using all the world skips. Even with just blazing through the game, it still gave me a good amount of time, and it took a little bit of trouble. I was doing attempts for a couple months on and off to actually beat this one, and when I eventually did, it still felt really good. It's still a game that I find myself playing through from time to time, just because of how simple it is. It stands the test of time, if not because it's highly influential, but because it's still fun to play all these years later, and for that, it gets an A. Punch-Out! Or the Wii. I've been a fan of the Punch-Out arcade game and NES game for a really long time, so I've always been super interested in picking up the Wii version of the game. And after I picked it up, I did nothing but play it for like a week straight. It's a very engrossing game to the point where I would forget what was happening around me. As a remake, it's fantastic, as many of the same tricks that were in the NES game still remain. Do not be mistaken though, this game is still tough as nails and a pleasant challenge. I played through the main circuit and haven't even touched the rematches, but I can tell you I'll be going back eventually to try them all out. Overall, I highly recommend this Wii title. It stands so tall that it makes you forget that it's a remake from time to time. It gets an S. Finding Paradise. Finding Paradise is a sequel to one of my favorite games of all time, To the Moon. And as much as I like its predecessor, it has a fantastic story and level of characters, I don't think this game has that strong of an emotional pull as the first game. It's still very good and worth your time, but I wasn't in tears like I was with the first game. I could tell the story is more ambitious than the last game, but I don't think their ambition led to a better story overall. The game also runs kind of poorly on PC. They've made remastered versions for Switch, so I hope that those do get ported to PC at some point. Either way, I'm still excited to see what the team cooks up for the next game in the series. This game gets an A. Moro Datsukitsu Rhythm Daishi Osutake Oendan 2. God, I hope I pronounced that right. Anyway, I'm a super mega fan of Elite Beat Agents on the DS, and Japan was super cool and got 2 unique entries in the series, and this is the second one of those 2 games. I wish I could speak more to the story segments in this game, but since it's all in Japanese, I cannot. I will say the music is bumpin'. The gameplay is fun and a good challenge, and the visuals tell a pretty funny story, and it was fun to make up my own. I see myself coming back to this game over the years to get better and better at it and beat harder and harder missions. Now, as to whether I like it more or less than Elite Beat Agents, I couldn't tell you. They each go for a different vibe, both of which I like, but one isn't inherently stronger in my mind than the other. I'll just give it an A, but I have a feeling that'll change as time goes on. Metroid Fusion. I've always loved Metroid games, and for no real reason in particular, I waited quite a while before picking this one up and properly finishing it. I'm actually really impressed that they were able to create a horror-like experience on the Game Boy Advance of all things. It's very surprising that SAX is a commanding force that you actively want to avoid when they show up, because there isn't a way you can beat yourself in your state. Although, I do wish that the SAX did show up more. They only really show up like 3 or 4 times over the course of the game, even if it was just on the other side of a wall or in a small cutscene or something along that line. One thing I'm not a big fan of is being told where to go for a good chunk of the game. I get that it's a handheld, so it's nice to have the direction pointed out to you if you shell the game for a while, but I played the game almost entirely over the course of a day, so it was really annoying continually getting briefings. I would have liked to just explore the game on my own. The game is solid in the gameplay department, with challenging but not impossible bosses that make it fun to play. A. Portal! I played Portal 2 way back in the day on PS3, but I never got the chance to play the original. With the companion pack on Switch, I've got to say the game's great. It's a bit on the simple side if you've played Portal 2, but there are some genuinely puzzling sections without being impossible. I like the slight bit more focus on taking down turrets in a unique way as to not open yourself to portal fire. Plus, GLaDOS being a presence throughout the whole game is such a nice cherry on top of the game. And the game has a pristine, clean look that is off-putting, and so when you see some of the dark, dingy areas, it has a stark contrast and fits the theming of the game perfectly. If you somehow haven't played it, I highly recommend it. S.
You're doing quite well.
AI, The Somnium Files. Last year, I talked about the fantastic Zero Time Dilemma, and this is a game by the same director. Much like the Nonary series, I love this game too. This game, while still serious, actually captures a more jokey tone, with the absolute absurdity of the Somniums, and how Aiba and Date interact with them. I like that the Somniums functionally act as a dream, actually open the game a bit to more surreal without completely breaking the reality of the game. Puzzles feel a bit more interesting without feeling completely abstract. You could tell that this game had a bit more of a budget, and they made full use a large voice cast of voice actors for even small characters, more interesting animations, and an overall longer game. I won't talk about much of the story, just know that it's amazingly well written. And if you love a very well written visual novel, I can't recommend this one enough. S. It Takes Two. It Takes Two is not a game that I would normally pick up, but after it won Game of the Year in 2021, it definitely caught my attention. It Takes Two is the kind of game I feel like I have a hard time finding nowadays as a completely cooperative multiplayer experience. I feel like cooperative multiplayer games are something along the lines of Overcooked, an arcade game that, while fun, is pretty simple and easy to pick up to play. Because of that, they stay on the pretty simple side. Or they go for the opposite end, with something like Portal 2, where you have like one friend that you have to go through the whole experience with, because the game will keep upgrading the powers over time, so somebody new jumping in won't be able to understand how the gameplay changes from section to section. It Takes Two somehow avoids both of these pitfalls by being able to change gameplay styles from section to section, even having players utilize different abilities, giving each section its own distinct feel. Gameplay isn't the only thing that changes, it's also the environment, whether you're in a snow globe or in outer space. It's constantly changing without losing that cohesiveness. And the story is nice if you're there for it, but it doesn't go too deep or too hard, so if the person you're playing with changes, they aren't blindsided. It's a game well deserving of Game of the Year, and it does something unique which I appreciate. S.
Ask yourself, can you really own the people you love?
Blackbird. Blackbird is another Onion Games game, but I feel like it goes for a different tone than most of their work.
in that it's darker, opting for a more muted color palette while still maintaining the wacky character design. Overall, the story is a lot less defined than in past games, going for a more cryptic, almost picture book-esque feel. This leaves the player to determine the story for themselves, which I appreciate. I haven't even talked about the gameplay yet. The gameplay is a side-scrolling shooter where the player is allowed to go both directions, much like something like Fantasy Zone, with your objective being to take down all the guard towers in an area before fighting a boss. The earlier stages are a piece of cake, but later stages will require full situational awareness to get through. It does seem like as you beat the game more and more endings unlock, and more stages become available to the player, which is something to keep in mind. Overall, I found the arcade-like gameplay mix with a cryptic story extremely enjoyable, so I'll give the game an A. Pokemon Crystal! I think generally the game is very good. It's a good evolution for the Pokemon franchise. However, I have some gripes. First is the learn set. They're awful, not getting a good attacking move until late in the game. My Jumpluff didn't learn any attacking move until its 40s. My Typhlosion's only fire type move for 7 of the 8 Johto gyms was Ember. Secondly, most Pokemon in Gen 2 were locked into the late game or had very specific condition, which stinks. I really wanted to use Yanma, Heracross, or Tyranitar on my team. However, Heracross is super rare, and the other 2 you don't get super late into the game, which is when your main team is no doubt established. Lastly, the Gen 1 postgame, while cool, wasn't super well balanced. The gym leader teams, minus Blue, had Pokemon in the 30s, and wild Pokemon encounters were around level 10 or lower. Don't get me wrong, it's still a good game, but I see no reason to play it over the remakes, which is not the same thing I could say for Generation 1. I give the game a C. Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Kirby in the Lost World is the first 3D Kirby game, and what an impressive jump to 3D it was. Everything from the lighting to the music to the level design, and even Kirby themselves was absolutely stellar. The game does start a little slowly, however it picks up really fast. I was floored by the level design as it all felt cohesive, and yet each place felt completely alien for Kirby. A mall, a theme park, a mine, and even a circus? I fell in love with Waddle Dee Town and how, as you save more of them, more amenities become unlocked. I love taking a break from the main game and going fishing or serving a burger or two, or just exploring the town. Even the challenge levels with the different cop abilities were fun to play. Kirby in the Overlooked Plain has an absolutely bonkers... You get it? It's a Kirby reference! Anyway, Kirby and the Ignored Pathway has an absolutely insane ending that I won't spoil for you. Just know that it's insane, and I couldn't help but laughing at all the insanity. Just know that I loved my time with Kirby and the Misplaced Keys. It's a game that has a lot to do past the credits, and it doesn't feel like it overstays its welcome, so I'll be playing it for a while still. A. Ninja Baseball Batman. This is one of the few times I get to talk about an arcade game, so this is a bit exciting. I obviously don't own the arcade cabinet itself for a multitude of reasons, so I'd like to thank Shalauchi at Longplay for the footage. And shout out to Starcade in Minneapolis for housing the machine and maintaining it. This game was a glowing recommendation from my friend Max, and he had been hyping up the game way before I had even had the chance to play it. Despite the high expectations that my friend had set, I can tell you that this game did not disappoint. It's a wacky game. The plot is that you are recovering all the parts of a Babe Ruth statue that were shattered around the USA. As for the gameplay, it's a very fun beat-em-up with specials and screen-clearing moves. It's fun just to see how wacky the bosses and enemies would get, because as you travel around the USA, the landscape would drastically change, leaving no level feeling the same. The game is definitely a quarter muncher, especially near the end, which made me glad that we were at an arcade with infinite credits. If you have 3 friends and the ability to play this game, I highly recommend it, as it is unique as far as arcade games go. Therefore, the game gets an S. It's an S tier from me, and I'd love to see it re-released on modern platforms. AI, The Somnium Files, Nirvana Initiative. AI, you did it again! Don't worry, if you haven't played the game, I won't spoil anything, and the backing footage is from the beginning of the game. The game is very similar to its predecessor, with just a bit more polish to the Somniums overall. The cast of the game is twice as big, to the point where it's sometimes hard to keep track of people and what they're doing. My only real complaint is that the game felt more linear than in the past. Some character interactions don't seem to make sense with what was happening in the game, or it would drop seemingly important facts and then not develop them until like 10 hours later. It left me thinking that I was missing something, or just waiting for the game to explain how something like that is even possible. I will say that the twist towards the end of the game left me floored, and honestly made a lot of things make a lot of sense. I can tell that if I get the chance, it's the kind of game that I'd love to sit down with somebody and watch them play the game all over again. Plus, the final unlockable is super cool and made me giddy with glee. I can't even tell you. The game absolutely gets the S rank.
Good work! I got some nice footage of the reenactment.
I still don't understand why the acting was necessary.
Five Nights at Freddy's. The game that swept the nation in like 2014 and has been able to keep some degree of popularity going over like the past 8 years. Ugh, gross, that's so old. Despite all that, I never really played any of the FNAF games outside of messing with VR, which... no. So, needless to say, I'm a little late to the trend. For all the memeing this one gets, I think it's a genuinely good horror game, despite my distaste for the genre. Now, on the actual gameplay side, it's very simple, incredibly so. It's really easy to develop one strategy and go off of that for the entire game, but I think for a small indie game with practically no budget, I'm impressed with how much they're able to do here. Just atmosphere-wise, it would get an A, but gameplay-wise, it gets like a C, so I think I'll just meet in the middle and give it a B. Pokemon Violet. Okay, so here's the thing. The game is a buggy mess, and I'm upset that the Pokemon Company would feel okay releasing a game that's so slow, buggy, and in a broken state. I also believe that Pokemon games are coming out way too fast, leading to the game's quality taking a hit in general. However, on the other hand, I genuinely mean this when I say it, Pokemon Violet is the most fun I've had with a main series Pokemon game in quite some time. I like the shake-up to the typical Pokemon formula. I think the new Pokemon are super cool. I think a lot of the new characters are cool. I think the auto-battle feature is a godsend. I like just running through the world. It's a good time. And on the other hand, the game could have been so much more. I feel like there are so many features like Terra types and level scaling that could have been so much better. There are so many nitpicks that I could talk about for forever. Just know that I really enjoyed a lot of this game, but I'm not gonna be blind to its problems. I would feel weird not giving this game an A, even though it definitely does not deserve it. Dadish. Dadish is probably the most video game I've ever played. It's a pretty simple platformer that takes one level concept and uses it to its fullest potential for an entire world and then moves to the next level concept. Levels are pretty short and sweet, and they're not too difficult, and overall it's super enjoyable. The little reward is all of the little character interactions between Dadish and his kids, and it's a super nice end level treat. It's hard to not say one more level after each and every level. It's nothing groundbreaking, it won't blow your socks off, but it's enjoyable all the way through, so it gets an A.
The House of the Dead.
God, I love that intro. Another arcade game, so I'd like to thank George C3 for their Longplay footage. The House of the Dead is an arcade classic. Its story makes no sense, the voice acting is laughably bad, and the game is a notorious quarter-muncher. With only 4 short levels, you can beat the game in 30 minutes or so. But you know what? I don't care. It's a fun game, and I revisit it whenever I go to the arcade. I just actually beat it this time with a friend, and we make fun of its stupid garbage that the game throws at you. If you see it at a local arcade, I highly recommend strapping in for the half hour or so it takes to beat it. You won't regret it. It's just so stupid and silly that I love the game. It gets an A. Rhythm Heaven Fever. Rhythm Heaven Fever just feels so perfect on the Wii. With the Wii remote being able to be held like a baton, it's really nice for keeping timing. There aren't a lot of games like Rhythm Heaven, and Fever is a shining example of the series. I like the gameplay more than Megamix, as I feel it's quicker to get in and out of levels, and generally the music was just a lot better. If I beat one rhythm game a year, I'm going to run out of them too fast. So here's to hoping that the indie game Bits and Bops is good. The demo is really promising. Sorry, I got a little off track. Fever absolutely gets an A. Dadish 2. You know the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? That saying has never been more true than in Dadish 2. If you had told me that this was just Dadish, I wouldn't personally be able to tell. However, even though very little has changed, that's not necessarily a bad thing, as the game is still fun, and they were able to add a lot of new gameplay concepts that changed up the gameplay. And some refreshing, those all still in that Dadish style. Because it's so similar, I'm gonna give it the same rating as the first Dadish. It gets an A.
Okay, so here's the thing about the next 2 recordings. I own a 3DS capture card, but not a new 3DS capture card. And I couldn't find good recordings of either of these games on the internet, so sorry in advance about the quality of these next 2 recordings.
Galaxy Pain. What is there to even really say about this game? It's a 50-cent new 3DS title that was released in April of this year. I bought it because, why not? It's 50 cents, and you need to have some courage releasing a game on a console's deathbed, let alone at the shops. The game goes for this ARG style, so the story is vague and means very little. I assume the idea is that you're supposed to buy the other games from the Butterfly Corporation, but I've tried the others, and much like this one, the games are very simple, hard, and short. At 50 cents, why not pick up the game? But the main game is 5 minutes long, and I can't really say I expected much, but even then it fell below those expectations. F. Phasmophobia, Hall of Spectres 3D. It's literally first-person Pac-Man. I wish I was joking, but everything from Pac-Man is here. The way you launch ghosts, from the power pellets, the ghosts having the same colors and attributes. The only thing that is different is instead of collecting dots, you're collecting pages on the wall. And they can be hard to find, because the game doesn't even keep track of them for you. So, it could take a while, if only because you aren't sure where you haven't looked. The biggest question I have is, what the heck does this even have to do with Phasmophobia? I think I'm just gonna stick with standard Pac-Man, thanks. F. Portal 2. Note that I'll only be talking about the single-player mode right now. After playing the first Portal not that long ago, and while I was sick for a couple days, I decided to pick up my old favorite, Portal 2. And man, I just forgot how much I love the humor in this game. Like, there are so many instances where the game got me to laugh out loud, from the stupidity of Whitley, or the condescending attitude of GLaDOS, or the absolute breakdown of Cave Johnson. The atmosphere of the first game is gone, replacing the sterile rooms with ones with overgrowth, shattered floors, flooding, and dirt, which on its own makes it super visually distinct. Don't get me started on the puzzles. While not too particularly hard, they aren't crazy easy either. And the game gets really creative with the gels and retractor beams, and uses both to make unique and engaging puzzles. Portal 2 is able to keep its momentum even though the game is 3 times longer than its predecessor. There is truly nothing like the Portal series, and specifically Portal 2. And for that reason, it receives an S.
Smooth jazz will be deployed in 3, 2, 1.
And those are all the games that I beat for this year. But Diego, I swear I saw you beat other games this year on your Twitter. Not so subtle plug for my Twitter, but yeah, I actually did beat some other games this year. And they were all Game Gear games. The reason I am not reviewing those is because I actually want to make it part of its own series. The Game Gear games are something that I've been trying to go for a full set of, and so I'm going to be doing a review of every single Game Gear game that's ever come out. I'm still looking to get a capture card for a Game Gear, and that's still coming, so that might be a little bit longer, but that's also why you haven't seen any of those games in this video, even though I've beaten like 6 or 7 of them. And you can view them all in my backloggery. Thank you for joining me in my Year of Review 2022 for this year. My top 3 games for this year were AI, The Somnium Files, AI, The Somnium Files, Nirvana Initiative, and Dandy Dungeon. And my least favorite games were Pokemon Crystal, Hall of Specters 3D, and Galaxy Gal Pain. Not in that order specifically, but you get what I mean. Anyway, I don't have a controller plugged into this, so I don't know how I'm gonna get back to playing it, but like, yeah.